Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Full Ride, the college recruiting podcast. This is your recruiting coach, Quito Delgado. And as always, we are proudly brought to you by You Recruit You. The mission of You Recruit You is to educate, equip, and empower our student athletes to take complete control of their college recruiting process. So if you want to learn more about You Recruit You and our services, please visit yourecruityou.com. And you can also follow us on social media at You Recruit You. But how are we feeling? I hope you're doing well as we wrap up January. I cannot believe we are already marching towards February. And I want to get right into today's episode and pick up where we left off, right? We're doing a 10-week series here where we really want to get back to the basics of college recruiting. There are so many myths out there that can quickly derail a student athlete's college recruiting process. So my goal here over the next few weeks is to debunk those myths, not only for our student athletes, but also for our mom and dads out there. So last week, in case you missed it, the first myth that we talked about was if you are good enough, college coaches will find you. That was myth number one. If you missed it, please go back and listen to last week's episode. Building on that is a myth as it relates to timing. I think many student athletes, because the college application process typically begins their senior year, many families believe that the college recruiting process also begins senior year, which is why I'm going to talk about that a little bit more today. And myth number two is college recruiting starts your senior year. That is one of the biggest myths out there and easily costing our families tons of money, missed opportunities, and ultimately leads to frustration. And we want to make sure that we put that myth to bed during today's episode. So here's the reality. If you wait until your senior year to get serious about the college recruiting process, there's a good chance you're going to fall, below the cracks. You're going to get looked over. You're not going to get discovered. In many situations, coaches have already built out their target list of student athletes. You're not included in it, and as a result, no offers will come your way, right? So instead, on the flip side, though, many of you families, because again, you guys watch Twitter, you see these online publications, you see ESPN, have their top 100 players, class of 2026, and that kind of makes you a little uneasy. You get nervous, you panic, and you start to wonder, well, wait a minute, my kid is entering their freshman year of high school. How come they aren't getting recruited? How come any coaches aren't calling them? How come they're not getting letters? Right? How come their Twitter isn't blowing up with college coaches? So there's almost like an extreme in both directions. You got some families who think it doesn't start until senior year, and then you got other families who, in the 8th, 9th grade, they're panicking if they haven't heard from a college coach. So I want to meet you guys in the middle here, right? I get asked this question all the time. When does college recruiting begin? And my simple answer is always the same. One, it depends. And people get so upset when I say that. But it really does depend. It depends on the student athlete. It depends on the sport they play. It depends on their ability. But most importantly, when I say it depends, because I break it up into two different ways, right? When it comes to grades, academics, eligibility, which we can get to later on in future episodes, college recruiting technically starts your freshman year. And the reason why it starts your freshman year is because that's when they start counting your grades as it relates to your GPA in your core classes and being eligible to play at the Division I or the Division II level, right? There are what they call core classes that you have to take. As an example, English, math, science, history, right? Those types of classes, they're called core classes. You start taking them your freshman year of high school. So now, yeah, you may not start getting called or recruited by a college coach until your junior or senior year. However, your eligibility started your freshman year. So that's why I always tell families, technically, college recruiting starts your freshman year of high school, because you're starting to build your academic foundation, which has a big impact on whether or not you're going to meet the eligibility standards. And so I always tell families, if you think your son or daughter, or if you're a student athlete, if you think you want to pursue an opportunity to play in college, even if you're not certain, you want to make sure you hit the ground running your freshman year of high school, so that you can build that solid foundation when it comes to your grades and your future eligibility requirements. So on one hand, yes, college recruiting starts your freshman year. On the other hand, many of you will quickly get frustrated if you're trying to call college coaches, if you're emailing college coaches as a freshman or as a sophomore, and none of them are returning your calls, none of them are returning your emails, right? None of them are showing you any interest. That's a quick way for you to get frustrated. But the reason why many of them aren't redoing that is because they're not able to do that when you're only a freshman or a sophomore. So they can't even communicate with you over the phone. So sure, you can spend all this time calling them and reaching out to them, filling out online questionnaires, but the reality is they can't call you back until, in many instances, and again, there's always different rules for different sports, but for the most part, a good rule of thumb, coaches can't really call you until the beginning of your junior year of high school. That's a good rule of thumb for most of you to have regarding your sport, right? So yeah, they may send you letters, they may send you emails prior to, but a lot of that's going to be generic anyway. I look at it as college recruiting with coaches. It really begins when they are calling you, they're texting you, they're sending you personalized letters, they're talking to your coach about you. That's when the process truly begins. And most of the time, that's not going to happen until, you going into your junior year, that summertime area. All right. So once again, yes, it does not start your senior year of high school. But the biggest, my biggest response, again, I gave you two different examples here. Of course, academically, it starts your freshman year. But for me, in general, a good rule of thumb, the college recruiting process truly begins when the student athlete makes the conscious decision that they want to play in college. That truly is when the college recruiting process begins. We can talk all we want about, the grades and how important it is to get off to a fast start as a freshman. All that's really important. But ultimately, college recruiting begins when a student athlete demonstrates the desire to play in college, and then as a result, they take massive action towards working towards that goal. So it's a mindset shift. It's no longer about, I just want to play because I love it and it's fun. I just want to play to be around my friends. No, there's literally a shift that has to happen because most high school student athletes, being honest with you, they don't want to play in college. And you can tell right away. They're the ones that, they practice, but they only practice when a coach tells them to practice. It's always a team. They work out, but they only work out when it's a group, when the whole team works out together. They don't play travel ball, right? They don't do anything travel. They probably don't have a personal trainer or a strength coach. they're just literally saying, you know what, I love playing, it's fun. And once high school comes and goes, they're cool with walking away from the sport. And guess what? There's nothing wrong with those student athletes. And that's why there are so many current high school student athletes who don't go on to play college sports. Not because they aren't good enough per se, it's because they just don't have a desire. They have other interests that they want to pursue. So you just got to almost wipe those student athletes out of the equation. That's why I kind of laugh when you hear, well, only 7% of high school athletes go on to play in college. Well, sure, only 7% go on to play, but of the 100%, what percentage of them actually want to even pursue an athletic scholarship beyond high school, right? If you have, let's say, 1 million high school student athletes, and of the million, only 300,000 actually want to play in college, I guarantee you there's a spot for those 300,000 athletes if they put their mind to it and they work for it. So don't get caught up in these stats when you hear, don't get discouraged when you hear, well, only 7% of student athletes in high school go on to play athletics, because in many situations, most of them aren't even trying to pursue, an opportunity to play sports in college. But for those of you who do want to play in college, I'm telling you, the recruiting process truly begins when you make that decision and then you decide to commit to doing whatever it takes for you to make that dream a reality. You say no to good in order to be great. You make sacrifices that your friends aren't willing to make. You work just a little bit harder. You start to educate yourself on the do's and don'ts of college recruiting. You start to study up on the recruiting calendar. You start to study up on, college recruiting terms. You learn more about core classes and how to calculate your GPA. Again, you make an investment in time. So now you start playing travel ball. You make an investment in money. So now you may hire a trainer, your mom and dad. You might then also decide to hire a tutor to raise your GPA. You might decide to hire an SAT coach to make sure you can test well for the standardized test. You start to make deliberate decisions that are going to put you on a path to success. And it all starts with the student athletes having that mindset of making that choice. So that's when the college recruiting process truly begins. And for many of you, if you're not making that decision, if you're not committing to doing that until your senior year of high school, by then it's too late. Because by then, maybe you didn't do as well as you should have done in your grades, with your grades. And now you're behind from an eligibility standpoint. Or you didn't start playing on a travel ball team until, the summer of your going into your senior year. By that time, it may be too late because the circuit's already begun, teams have already been filled, coaches have already started recruiting their top prospects, and maybe you missed that window, right? So by waiting until your senior year, sure, there are always stories, and everyone always hears these stories about how certain student athletes, they were late bloomers, they got discovered late. Okay, yeah, absolutely, that definitely happens. But for the majority of you, if you wait until your senior year, it's too late. So ideally, you want to make this decision when you're an 8th grader, a 9th grader, and now you have 3-4 years to build up and navigate the college recruiting process without experiencing burnout, without experiencing frustration, right? So do not wait until it's your senior year to get serious about the recruiting process. Make small sacrifices now, as freshmen, as sophomores, as juniors. commit to the process now so that come your senior year, you got yourself in a great position to get offers. You're ready, you're prepared, and now it's your moment, it's your time to shine. And all the offers will then follow. All right? But that's what we got for you this week. I want to encourage all of our families out there, be good teammates and share this episode with other family and friends. And I just also want to remind you guys, if you are an athletic director, if you are a coach of a sport, if you are of a high school, maybe you run an AAU or a travel team, we do provide workshops, college recruiting workshops for schools, athletic departments, 1 hour seminars, where I can come and speak to individual teams if you like. But my goal really, again, is to, help families, understand, the ins and outs of college recruiting. And unfortunately, a number of, teams and high schools, don't have, the resources readily available to help these hardworking student athletes and hardworking parents, truly understand what they're up against. So I'm looking to bridge that gap. Of course, there are going to be fees and small fees associated with it, but ultimately, it's well worth it. So if you want to learn more about our workshops, you want to get in touch with me, visit yourecruityou.com, or you can just email me, Coach Kito, Coach Kito @gmail.com. But I do encourage you to come on back next week as we tackle myth number 3 of college recruiting. But until next time, this is your recruiting coach, Kito Delgado, reminding you that college recruiting starts with you. What steps are you taking today to earn a scholarship tomorrow?